So our pipeline starts, for me, it starts with scripts. Now, this is just my way. Wow, I can walk around and I can use my hands. This is amazing. Sorry. So scripts are I have to assume everyone here knows what a script is, and not like programming script. If you are unfamiliar, script is what the writers get down. They write the whole story and all the dialogue and in-betweens and so on. And the rest of the company gets to look at that and say, hey, this is really awesome, or it's really not. But and then we go through the process of working to these scripts, right? So for me, with my department, I try to get ahead of the game as early as possible. And by doing this, by reading through the scripts, I'm able to come up with ideas for what this thing is going to sound like, some mixed decisions we're going to make, some sound effect decisions we have to make, things we have to go out and record. Alina, who's typically our recording engineer, takes the time to go through the whole thing and find out what efforts need to be recorded, and we'll touch on that in a minute. You can kind of see over on the right side, yeah, it's your right, I have a couple of mock-up notes that I did. I kind of put this together. It's never this neat. It's usually me scribbling on a piece of paper, and it looks like a doctor wrote on it. It doesn't make any sense to anyone except for me, sometimes not even me. But yeah, I kind of try to go over the script in a way that is, it's meaningful, but I'm not pigeonholing myself into something that I'm not going to work on for 5-6 more months. Because if you don't know much about animation, it takes a long time to do it. There's a lot of people who work passionately and tirelessly on this stuff. Everything from storyboard or art and storyboard to animation and viz post. And so we don't get to that point until, hell, even after editorial has touched it, which they are kind of our cohorts or our companions. So when I put this stuff down on paper, it's me kind of coming up with a way to just figure out what it might be, what it might sound like, because you have to have that architecture, you have to have that guideline for yourself. And again, we go out and we're gonna want to record stuff. Hey, there's gonna be a giant dinosaur here. Let's go find a giant dinosaur to record. That, well, you may or may not know dinosaurs don't exist, just in case. Yep, see, there was always one. There's always one I didn't know. But yeah, and so we want to go out and record as many vehicles, or go out to the firing range, record weapons. It's kind of a new concept for us because we've always been very short on time. But this year it's kind of a different game, and so we're trying to take advantage of that. So moving on from scripts, the next natural order is voiceover recording. If you're unfamiliar with voiceover, it's the art of going into a booth and recording into a microphone, reading the script, and bringing some characters to life. We have a whole myriad of different voiceover actors that we work with, both people who are veterans in the industry and have been doing things for shows like My Hero Academia, Dragon Ball Z, Full Metal Alchemist, and a lot of the new crew, the people who have been primarily focused on things like RWBY or Red vs. Blue and some of our other internal IP. Speaking in terms of the pipeline, the first thing we do is in our recording sessions, and I won't get into the setup of it, but we go and record what we call the 3-pass method. And this is the act of, or the art of, having the voiceover actor give you 3 performances. So in an instance, they'd say, 3-pass method, 3-pass method, 3-pass method? And then the director will then try to guide them and give them some more motivation for where to go with that line. And that can go up to 9, 10, 12, 20, 30, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is they go until they get the performance right. Now, we don't typically do ADR for our shows because we give the animators some dialogue to work with. They make all the lip flaps, which is a weird way to say mouth movements, but that's what it is. They take the dialogue that we record and they animate to that. So ADR is pretty common in a lot of other places, but not for us. We might occasionally go back and do ADR here and there if time permits, but straight, like up front, 3-pass method, it works. It works really, really well, and I'll show you a picture or two here in a minute. Efforts recordings, I mentioned those earlier. So efforts, like I put there, it's that quote from that game Zelda that's really dialogue heavy. Efforts are the non-dialogue exertions. They're the non-dialogue voice over, right? It's the hup, yeah, it's the, the drop on the ground, it's the jump, it's the slash, it's the throw, it's all the things that you would have to exert or the sounds you would make without actually speaking words. Sometimes there are words, I suppose, but hup and yeah aren't exactly, I think, a part of Webster's dictionary. Most of our recordings at Rooster Teeth are in-house. We have a 10 by 10 booth. It's not quite large, but it's not quite small. It's definitely better than it was before. And we've come quite a way. So it's a nice treated room. In that room, we have a monitor that has our scripts on it. We have a couple of music stands that also host scripts. We have a couple of mic stands. And on those mic stands, we have typically a TLM 103 or an SM7B. Now, I'm saying this because I get this question every single time. What gear do we use? And I want you to know that this is the gear we use. However, this is also expensive, and you do not need this, at least not until you get to, later in your professions. So I'm putting that out there. Again, I just want everybody to know so I don't get that question later, but also so I let you know that that was like a very expensive microphone. The SM7B is a little bit cheaper, and it's a great microphone. The reason we use that is because it's a dynamic microphone, and it handles high SPLs, so like louder volume, much better. It's really good for effort. It's really good for that stuff. It's also really good for people who stream on Twitch or YouTube or what have you. It's like a nice broadcast mic. Really good for screamers if you're into metal. A little pro tip for you there. And then the SSL X-Logic Alpha channel is our preamp. Again, quite expensive, not necessary. Focusrite has a great new line of the third generation Scarletts, and they have, I think all of them have the Claret pre's. And Fela Davis and I were talking about it yesterday, and it's like the Clarets sound really nice, and those are very cheap interfaces. We also have an Avid Omni because we work primarily in Pro Tools, which I guess I should mention now. We are a Pro Tools house, though Reaper is really great if you are into sound design and cannot or do not want to buy Pro Tools. I recommend it. You get it for $65, or you can use it for free until you feel like you want to pay $65. So here are those pictures I mentioned earlier. I'll take a sip of water while you look and marvel in its glory. I know it's a lot to take in. A lot to take in. So, this is when we record. When we record a session, so these are post-record. I had to take these after. But when we're recording a session, we typically drop markers down based on the line numbers. I'm going to jump back for a bit here. If you look at next to each line of dialogue, next to every character here, you see that there's a number, and that indicates the line of dialogue. It indicates what number it is. So for us, it's a series of, man, I just had a realization, but I'll touch on that later. It's a series of making sure you're accounting for every line of dialogue so that nothing gets missed. So for us, when we go through this process and we record things, we'll drop markers based on what line of dialogue it is, so that when we edit in the future, we don't have to figure that stuff out. It makes life way easier, and you'd be very surprised at how many people don't do that. Recommend it. It is great. The second thing we do, and this is something that if you do not do this when you record dialogue in the future, I will shame you, because I will find you and I will shame you. I'm saying that now. So, as you can see at the bottom, the second row here, I guess, actually, I should ask, how many of you are unfamiliar with Pro Tools? Like, how many of you have not used Pro Tools? Okay, sweet. Great, I should get this out of the way. Pro Tools is a DAW, a digital audio workstation. It is the primary household name for audio in post-production audio. There are many others out there, but Pro Tools is the one that typically reigns king in film and animation. It's just really good at handling all that stuff. It's also got some problems, and a lot of people complain about it, but that's a different conversation altogether. So in Pro Tools here, we have these tracks. We're looking at two tracks. And the top is something else. That top track there is our recorded dialogue, and underneath that is where we've dropped groups. These blank groups indicate what lines of dialogue are in this session. So as you can see, it's not like I've made a giant solid mass under all of that. It's under very specific groups here. So as you can see, there's this chunk here and this chunk here, and you can see it's kind of hard to see the markers here, but this is a 3-pass. This is the same line 3 times. You can tell by looking at the transients, the wave shape, the waveform, it's all the same. So what we do there is we have these groups underneath it to, when we go to edit in the future, we select that group in its entirety, take the selection, move up, grab what's above it, bring it down, and that's it. We've now edited that dialogue for all intents and purposes. Next slide, we'll talk about that. That's the key for our recordings. Outside of obviously making sure your levels are good, you want to make sure that you're not clipping out your microphone. You also want to make sure that your VO is not too quiet, because there's something called it's the noise to floor ratio. I can't even remember the noise floor ratio. Yeah. So we don't want to make it so that it's so quiet that we have to bring everything up. Next thing you know, you can hear your neighbor's refrigerator unit going off, and you definitely don't want that. That's a bad time. I mean, you don't even want your own refrigerator going off, so yeah, don't do that. So try to find that sweet spot right in the middle. You do that, get your waveforms to look about like this. You're doing all right. Good job. Good job, everyone. So VO edits. So this is what it looks like after we've recorded that dialogue. We've edited it all down. We put it in a big group and consolidate and name. Now, a lot of places will have you edit the dialogue and clean up plosives and mouth, those sounds. Sorry, I didn't mean for this to be ASMR. That's not my plan. That got really loud all of a sudden. Whew. Glad I did that beforehand. But yeah, so I got in my own head about that. I hate mouth sounds, sorry. It's my least favorite thing. But anyways, we don't spend a lot of time editing that stuff early on, because look at all of those takes. That's a lot of dang takes. And only one of those will get used. So that would be a lot of wasted work. Now, we will go through, if there's a plosive and we're like, hey, that's a good line of dialogue, we'll roll that off. Easy enough, we just grab an EQ, and we cut out some of the low end from that, or we'll drop a fade on it. There's a bunch of different tricks, but I won't get into the nitty-gritty unless someone asks about it later. Put that in your hat if you're interested. I've missed the most important part. When I mentioned the art of selecting, going up, grabbing, and pulling down, we don't just do that manually. No. We're not plebeians. We've moved on from that. There are macro programs out there. If you're not familiar with what macros are, familiarize yourself, because it is important for everyone to know. Macro programs are basically like a scripted way to do a gajillion things with the touch of a button. They're great to have. We use something called Quick Keys from a company called Startly. It's like $50. And Lena went through the process of making a whole suite of little like quick keys in there, little macros that go in, select a group, go up, grab it, edit, bring it down, go to the next one, select a group, up, bam, 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 bam. I can go through and run through an entire edit of a session in no time if we make sure to drop our groups. That's why I said it's important to do that. We still have to do a little bit of work here. We still have to consolidate, name, and so forth. But that takes the menial process of editing that stuff down. Like, just gets rid of it. No one wants to do that. I wouldn't even make any of you do that. Don't do that. So anyways, so like I mentioned, rough edits, we try to skip through having to get too granular with that stuff, because it's a lot. You don't want to waste that work. All right, so now we're getting into the post-production portion. This is going to be a little bit lengthy, but I'm going to try and get through it all so we have time for questions. For me, because I am the supervising sound editor, I typically have to do a lot of planning. And it's a little bit on the boring side, but it's kind of cool, because you try to look ahead and come up with some cool ideas, and you can work with your team and come up with some, collaborative ways to make things sound awesome. But I spend a lot of time in spreadsheets, which we'll go to in the next slide. But for right now, let's just talk about this stuff on the page here. When I make that spreadsheet, it's my way of saying, hey, team, these are the things we need to touch. Who wants to work on it? So I spot through the whole episode. I come up with this stuff. You know what? Let's just look at it real quick. This is what that looks like. So I go through in Pro Tools, and I drop a bunch of markers, and I drop a bunch of names and comments and that stuff, and I say, hey, this is an effort. I need this effort to seem more distressed on this moment here, because she's getting thrown against a wall. Blake is getting, it's one of our characters from our show's RWBY. And we need this effort from this other character. Now, these can be like a cross between notes from myself or from directors. This is kind of an example of what this sheet looks like after we've gone through iteration after iteration. But I will tell you this has made things so much better, because if there are 10 of us working on something, and we don't do reels, we don't do individual scenes per person, we work on the whole episode in its entirety. And so, someone will be like, hey, I want to work on all the creatures for this episode. It's like, okay, cool. Mark it down on the sheet. What are you working on? And then it's like, hey, when they get done with it, I can go back and give them a note, be like, hey, the Grim at 1 minute or 11 minutes and 38 seconds needs to be scarier or whatever. I could put that note in here, and then Andrew will know to go back in and jump right on that. So this has been hugely useful. I'm going to make a YouTube video about this at some point, just to share with my colleagues and folks like yourself at some point, kind of how this works, because this seems to be kind of a newer thing that people haven't realized you can do yet, but it's very, very cool, because Pro Tools makes it a little bit easier for me to do that. Back to the sheet real quick. So we talked about assigning groups and scenes. So we will talk about, typically we do groupings like vehicles, creatures, weapons. Well, maybe not so much weapons anymore, because we do fights now. Some people will design an entire fight by themselves. And it's cool because, my fight is going to sound different from your fight, and your fight is going to sound different from your fight. And that is what is so neat about it, is we're getting our own voices out there. But it's my job to oversee that and say, hey, this sounds a little too different. We need to dial it back, work within kind of the same libraries. Speaking of libraries, that was a great segue. Yes. These are some of the libraries that we use. Now, there is nothing wrong with editing with libraries. Nothing wrong with it. Okay? I mean, people are out there recording high-quality sounds for people like us to use. Nothing wrong with that. Go out there, go get yourself some libraries. These are they range from most expensive to least expensive, like going from right to left. Boom is fantastic. You'll typically find a library from them at about $250. Some of them are a little bit less, but they are very good libraries. I recommend waiting on sales too. There's a lot of sales out there. Big holiday sales for most plugins and libraries. Soundmorph is great. They have a much a different cost plan, but I love a lot of their stuff. It's really, really fun. They also have a bunch of plugins that they use, they make, they're really fun to use. Hiss and a Roar, a sound effect, are kind of the smaller shops that go out and record and make their own sounds. A sound effect is an aggregate where people like ourselves, we all go out and record and make cool sounds. We put them on a market, sell them for $20, and hopefully get some of that back. I recommend checking those out. At the very end, I have a link that I want everyone to make sure you take down, because that will also be important. If you are here, you are going to want to go check this out. But we'll get there later. In the meantime, take note of these. They're great. I'm giving all of these places, Sonus, Rabbit Ears Audio. There's a ton of other wonderful, wonderful, wonderful sound designers or field recordists out there. I didn't even put Blastwave up there. Rick Veers' stuff is up there. It's all, I mean, I'm not going to say everything is great, but there's a lot of really good stuff out there. I recommend going out and getting it. Foley versus Foley. This is me. I came up with that. I probably didn't, but I thought I was clever. There's a group of folks out there who are very upset all the time for some reason. And they don't like when the term Foley is used for something that isn't recording like the sound of your jacket rustling into a microphone to emulate a dragon, or to drop a chain and you're like making something happen to picture. Like they want it to be literal, because that is what it was, 20, 30 years ago. Foley is the art of, like performing your sounds to picture. But we've come a long way since then. There's a lot of tools out there. One tool that I recommend you check out is this tool. It's Edward Foley instrument from a company called Tovu. They make a really neat sampler that allows you to basically kind of throw down footsteps with your MIDI controller, or you write them in. And the footsteps sound pretty good. And they have a whole suite of different footsteps, and shoes and boots and heels and dirt, cement, plate, everything. Very cool. Recommend checking it out. It's not super expensive. Also, wait for sales. I'm very cheap, okay? All right, so this is my favorite part. Sound design and sound editing is kind of like my thing. It's my shtick. It's what I enjoy doing. Creatures and weapons are really, really fun, but they're also really, really hard. I recommend if you are going to make your first demo reel, maybe not to dive into those unless you are ready to make something sound maybe not super great. Trust me, I get it. I still make stuff that doesn't sound super great. They're hard, and sometimes you'll get, beat yourself up over it. Make these things, learn, fail. Haha, it's back. But I want you to know that like these are difficult for even like experienced and seasoned sound designers. So just putting that out there. So creatures and weapons are neat because, well, first and foremost, animation in and of itself is silent. They are animating this stuff, and there is no sound. You're not getting any production audio. You're not getting, no one's out there recording all of this stuff and using it. Now, we will have VO, obviously. That's VO notwithstanding. But in terms of like a character is walking, or a character is jumping, or a character is swinging their sword, they didn't record that on set. No, this is all animated. So we have to cut all of this stuff in. Well, creatures and weapons are all in that same boat, right? Especially because most of the creatures in our shows don't exactly exist in the real world. So, for us, it's the art of going through and making creatures sound otherworldly, sounding unique, but also sounding grounded in reality to some extent. Depends on what you're working on. For me, I like to reference a lot of live creatures. If I see that I'm working on, say, a gorilla creature, I might have someone who has a really deep voice get in the booth and give me like, and give me some of that stuff, and I'll record that at a very high sample rate. Sweet pro tip. Record at high sample rates if you can afford to, if you have a high frequency microphone. Those are kind of expensive. You can also do it with a regular microphone, but you might get some interesting artifacting. But going up to like 192K is pretty sweet because you can then record that and then slow it down in time, and it gives it an even deeper growl and a lot of like that bellowy charm, and it's really, really neat. But yeah, so I'll go and look at, like things to make stuff cool and work out. Now, I think I've got a video here. That's my cue to let you know back there. I know I have a video. What am I doing? I put it in here. What am I doing? Oh, and I'm showing you all my sweet jokes too. Okay. So I'm just gonna skip ahead. Don't mind me. Oh, Chris, you should have prepared better. It's all right. It's fine. I know where I'm going. Oh, yeah, sorry. Hey, spoiler alert, everyone. By the way, this is RWBY, and if you haven't watched the latest season, you are about to get real spoiled. Sorry. Oh, hey, everybody, we're just in a cave. We're just walking around in... Okay, cool. This is the part I wanted to show you. All right, so let's watch this part.
All right, Blake. Take a look around. Is there any dust in the immediate area?
Minecarts, debris. No dust, though.
Great, then it should be safe to blast our way through.
Okay, heading back. Damn it. Blake, stand back! Don't let it get away! Huh?
That's disgusting.
My sentiments, exactly. So there's some creatures and some weapons for you. So that is from Chapter 3 of RWBY 7, the most recent volume that we've been working on. Now, those sentinels, the centipede-type creatures, I designed those. I had a lot of fun with them. If I had more time, I probably would have spent forever on them. I'd still be working on it right now. That was like half a year ago. Now, how I mentioned earlier, I ground a lot of this stuff in reality. Well, yeah, we know centipedes don't make sounds. If you have centipedes making sounds like that outside your house, you got to move. You better move. You got problems. You got bigger problems. You got to take care of that. For me, that was going through and finding kind of the squeakier, screechier elements. You'll find that a lot of sound designers use pig squeals. I am guilty. I do that as well. That was a part of that. There are also other non-organic elements in there. I had a conversation with Andrew Scott, who is one of my sound designers, also Full Sail alum, really, really great sound designer. And we talked about this idea that, well, what about kind of more squeaky elements, like taking a hand and wiping it on glass and getting that like really weird, really gross kind of like, that sounds like if I went and did that right now, I'd be like, oh, it's weird, it's gross, why'd you do that? Sanitary, ugh. But yeah, but it worked out. It worked out so much so that I ended up using it all over the place. So it's not a whole lot of layers. The point I'm trying to get at is don't use a whole lot of layers. It's like maybe 3, 4, 5 layers in total for that entire vocalization. Now there are body movements and other things, really squishy, gory stuff, vegetables and all that other stuff, and that's great. But the idea for me was I wanted to make sure I was occupying different frequency ranges, different spaces, and giving different elements to each part so you can distinguish, hey, this thing is moving. Hey, this thing is squealing. You don't want to get muddled together, right? So for the vocalizations, it was like 4 or 5 layers total. And then for the body movements, when it was coming out of the ground there, it was like a combination of like a drill and a jackhammer, and I think I low passed some of it, and I ran it through a tremolator, and then or a tremolo effect, and then I did a bunch of other little things here and there just to try it out, because that's what we do as sound designers. We just try things out, and if it comes out sounding cool, you did your job. That's really it. The interesting thing was trying to find variations, because what I didn't show you, because I didn't want to spoil you too much, is there's that whole suite of all those things that shot out of the ground and look really nasty. Well, they fight those things. I guess that is a spoiler, sorry. So I had to vary all of that stuff up by way of pitching was one way to do it. Changing some of the sounds, finding different samples. I have pig squeals 1 through 12, and I'm going to use all of them, and I'm going to make them do what I need them to do, because it should not all sound the same. Don't make everything sound the same. Seriously, don't do it. Seriously. I get demo reels sometimes where people just use the same sound effect 5, 6, 7 times, and I'm like, don't even use it 2, 3, 4 times. If you're going to do it, use it here, and then use it 30 seconds later over here. That way my brain is like a short attention span. I'm not going to remember that. So now that you've seen my joke, I guess, I was and another one there. Wow, thanks, DJ Khaled. Thanks for joining me today, guest speaker. So the next thing I wanted to show you was okay. So spoilers again, I guess. RWBY is a show about fighting. Man, now I feel bad for spoiling you, because I'm about to show you the last episode from this season. Woo! I should have planned better. You know what? No, I'll do you one solid here. Are there any My Hero fans here? Whoa, that's a lot of you. Holy cow, okay. Are there any Naruto fans in here? Okay, it's about the same. Cool. Neat. I mean, the same people. I get you. I'm watching y'all, fam. I see you. We work on another show called Death Battle. If you're unfamiliar with Death Battle, just imagine hanging out with your friends, and you're like, hey, you know what? Thor could totally kick All Might's ass. Well, that doesn't actually happen here. That's nice. It was a lot of episodes, so kudos to you. That's a lot more than I've seen. In this case, we put together a All Might versus Might guy. They're from 2 different anime, or animes. I don't know what the plural of anime is. That's weird. My Hero Academia and Naruto. Now, they're both pretty legendary characters. I'm only going to show you a bit of this, but the point of this next video is it's okay to get stylized. You don't have to make every sound super realistic or super specific. You don't have to be like, I'm going to put a sound of this, and then this, and then this, and this. Wow, that was a great song, Kokkinos. Well done. I think it's important to know that when someone is getting ready to throw a big punch, you want to have that incoming whoosh. You want to have that really cool sounding like it's about to go off, drop out, impact, boom. Oh my God, dude just got his face shattered. How amazing. Man, I really want to show you all this clip though. It's fine. I'll show you the All Might Might guy fight because that's important, I suppose. I brought it for a reason. So I'm going to skip ahead because there's a lot of stuff here. So I'm going to show you a small bit of this. Oh, yeah, All Might, my guy. This is actually a really fun fight. Torian Crawford, one of our animators, he's brilliant. If you don't follow him and you are an animator, you like animation, you need to follow that boy on Twitter. He is incredible. All right, so I'm just going to play some of it because the whole thing. So this was done by Philip Spann and Andrew Scott, my mix engineer and sound designer, but we wear multiple hats. So I think Philip designed for Might Guy, and then Andrew did for All Might. So let's watch some of this. Boop.
Wow! Dynamic entry! Nice trick! My turn! Texas! You can take a hit well, but what are you really made of? But I'll show you exactly how hard I've worked. Sixth Gate of Joy, open!
And we're going to stop right there. Yeah, I know. I was watching it too. I was supposed to stop it like 30 seconds ago. And I was like, oh, I love this fight so much. It's so good. It's so good. So I definitely just confirmed my suspicion because it's been a little while since we worked on that. But yeah, Philip definitely worked on Might Guy because there was like 6 bass drops in there. And that's Philip's calling card. Needs more bass drops. But that's a perfect example, right? That's a perfect example of adding some extra sauce. Bass drops are dope. That's it. That's the panel. That's the speech. We're done here. No, bass drops, incoming whooshes, big explosions, using things like explosions for massive punches. Yo, that is cool. Like, let's be real. You're putting 2 huge dudes that are like really powerful into a place of combat, and they're gonna beat each other up. You want it to sound like 2 people are like, they can destroy the earth if they really wanted to, kind of business. They wouldn't, because they're both really good guys. As far as I know, I haven't watched Naruto, so don't spoil me or whatever. All 7,000 episodes. It's ridiculous. So it's important to have that extra sauce, that extra like niceness to it. Canon sound effects are important. I will only speak to this real quickly because we only have a few minutes left before I want to get to Q&A. But Canon sound effects are very important. I recommend making sure you name your files appropriately. Put them in a place where you're going to be able to find them later, because if you work on something for me and you make this super cool thing, and then I come back to you a year later, I'm like, hey, I need that sound that you made, or can you make some more stuff in that vein? And you're like, well, I don't know where I put it. And I called it Sound Effects 001 Final V2. Well, don't do that. Quit it, man. Name it appropriately, because if you do that, you'll be able to find it in the future. Yeah, that's my speech on that. The next part of the process is mix. I'm going to hit these points real quickly. Loudness specifications are important. Please look into broadcast specs. Look into loudness metering. Don't just use your RMS. Don't just use your meters in Pro Tools or what have you, or an Audition or Premiere or whatever. Well, Premiere actually has broadcast metering in there. But you want to make sure you're looking at loudness units, because that is what is like, that is it. That is what everyone is using for. When you go to cable television, you have to meet broadcast specs. If you go to Netflix, you have to hit broadcast specs. Even games are working on broadcast specs. And kind of a weird conversation, but look into that stuff. I didn't know that early enough on, and so when I started mixing it at Rooster Teeth, it became an interesting endeavor for me. Sorry, we're talking about my hero, and anyways, doesn't matter. Yeah, you get it back there. But yeah, so it's important to know that. make sure you're telling a story with your mixes. It doesn't always have to be just like, hey, can I hear that? Cool. Like, you're not just checking boxes. You want to make sure you're telling a story. So I'm going to show you a very, very short clip. Just not to take up too much more time. Sorry, now I have to spoil you. There's no getting past it, y'all. There's no getting past it. Close your eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. So here's a very important, so Philip went through, he's my mix engineer, as I mentioned earlier, and he went through and he did a really, really, really wonderful thing. It pulls on the heartstrings. If you're familiar with the characters in the story, this will mean a lot more to you. For the rest of you, you might just think it's kind of cool. Maybe. We'll see. Here we go.
The single quality
it's not
that
done.
is common across every living creature on this planet is fear.
Winter!
What did you do?
It's funny then that as common as fear is, we so easily underestimate its power.
Are you all right? Penny, what happened? She's gone. No. She's a part of you now.
Fear of growing close to someone. The subsequent fear of loss. Fear of failure.
Where's Oscar? And the relic?
And as more people depend on you, those fears can take on greater power.
I'm going to stop it there because there is a big spoiler after that, and I don't want to show it to you. But yeah, if you may or may not have noticed, there were a lot of sounds that weren't there. Well, that's because we made that decision to pull that stuff back. Philip was really adamant about doing this, and grown-ass man, I cried. It was really, really well done. And leading up to this point, the season is very, very hard. But, you know, a lot of wonderful things happened, and, you know, Philip did a great job of kind of putting that all together. Now, I'm going to really quickly talk about this. I thought it was really interesting. I couldn't actually find a single thing to put in just animation because we share so many commonalities with all the other realms, right? That we all have similarities. We all have different things. And the most important thing to note on this is that sound is and will always be 50% of that experience. For those of you that aren't audio folk, remember that. Your audio team will thank you. We can talk about this if you want to ask more about it later. General advice, be nice, work hard. Be kind to yourself. We are all creatives, and we all get down on ourselves a lot. Failing is okay. We talked about it more times than we probably should have. Drink water because, duh, your body needs it, dummy. And wow. Let's answer some questions, some A's, some Q's. I got it down right at the 15-minute mark. Good job, me. Howdy.
How you doing? My name's Matt Miller. I'm audio engineer. I really appreciate you being out here.
Yeah, Matt, thanks, man.
My question is, like, how did you get into this? What was your degree program? Did you initially want to do it in animation, or did you want to work in music, or?
Man, there's always one person in the audience that like knows my life story and they're not telling me. That's so funny. So yeah, my degree program was recording arts. I graduated in 2008. I came to Full Sail for music. I was a big old metalhead, and I thought I would record my own music, and I would be cool and become a millionaire from making my own stuff and recording my own stuff, and that definitely did not happen. Yeah, I don't let the suit fool you. Yeah, so I came here for music, and at month 3, a gentleman by the name of Tom Tadia, he's He's an instructor. He was an instructor here. Changed my life forever, which is amazing because, you know, that's what instructors are for, right? They're here to kind of teach you and show you things. I say they're here for that. They're here to teach you and show things, but like, let's be real, like someone changes your life forever, that's kind of a big deal, you know? Month 3, he showed me that there was a thing called game audio in his engine audio group, and I'm like, oh, this is neat. I love video games, and I like sounds, so let's see if this works out. From then on, it kind of changed the course of my life. After a few more months, well, a lot of months, I got to post-production, and we worked on a Dark Knight trailer for kind of like a post-production. I forget it's probably changed significantly since then, but we had to basically redesign, recut VO for Dark Knight trailer, and you know, we won. We won best in class, and like that was like I was like surefire, like this is what I want to do. Like I thought it was a cool idea to like use a whale sound for like when the truck like, I'm like, yeah, that's dope. And the teacher's like, yeah, that's dope. and so we won, and it was in no part just myself. It was a team. It was a team-o. So yeah, kind of changed pretty drastically over the span of the time I was here. Am I doing what I want to be doing? Sometimes. But, you know, I do know one thing. Sound design is awesome, and I have a lot of fun with it. Thanks for the question.
All right. Mishak Arnold is studying music production, and he would like to know, what is your experience with music editors in film and television, if any?
Outside of one of my best friends being a composer, it's not a whole lot. I mean, I talk to him a lot. So David Levy is a great composer. I recommend checking him out. He just put out a new album on Spotify. Dude's amazing. He's incredible. He's so humble. You know, I've talked with him about things like when we have ideas, when we watch an episode. He composes for Red vs. Blue, but he also worked on a show called Genlock, which if you haven't watched, it's on YouTube. You can watch the first episode. The first episode's for free on YouTube. Michael B. Jordan, David Tennant, Maisie Williams, a ton of people you may or may not have heard of if you watch any form of television. And so my experience is limited, but what I will say is there is an importance to knowing that communication is key between sound, design, edit, mix, and music. We're all working in the same space. We're all working with frequencies and sound, and we're trying to invoke like emotion. And so my advice to our friend online is just be open to feedback, be ready to talk about things with your sound team, and work together, push and pull. It's important to do that. It's kind of a softball throw. Howdy.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Cam, and I actually kind of had a question from like a voice actor's perspective. Sure. So obviously, like when you're working in a booth and you're doing like monster sounds, it's a lot of efforts and stuff like that, sure, and a lot of sounds and stuff. So I was wondering, like, what on your side do you do to kind of like mitigate all like again like the lip flaps and the gum flaps and like the all the water and stuff. Sorry, trigger warning. But yeah.
That's what happened there.
Yeah.
You're good. So there's a trick I'll recommend to you if you are a voice actor. It's a weird trick, but it works. Green apples are kind of cool for that. Green apples will like take. Talking about my mouth pucker. Wow, I couldn't even say words. But yeah, they kind of suck a lot of that moisture out of there, and it's really good for that. Making sure you're hydrated, make sure you're drinking water, tea, you're not drinking soda or anything else that has like a sugary like additive to it or what have you, because that will make it worse. So focusing on the waters, the teas, the Pedialytes. Pedialyte's great for your throat when you're like having to strain your voice for a long time. But yeah, green apples are a wonderful resource for. You bite into it, you're gonna feel it happened again. My mouth is puckering up. You bite into it, it kind of sucks out all that moisture, and you got rid of like some of that nasty extra stuff. Some of that stuff's kind of cool to have though. Just be kind of cognizant of that. You got it. Is that a dinosaur on your wrist?
No, you go first.
Sweet.
My name is Morgan in recording arts. You brought up a lot of
different animal sounds and for recording sound effects and stuff. And I was
Yeah.
wondering if there was one animal you found yourself using more in particular.
Birds.
And what about it? Birds. What
Birds.
about makes it so like versatile and
Birds are so cool. Like I hate birds. Like legit, I actually hate birds. I just hate them. They like poop on everything. They're loud when you don't want them to be. I hate them. But I will say, birds are so cool. Yeah, I know. Throwing mixed signals out there. No, there's a library, Birds of Prey by Boom, that just has some of the coolest sounds. Like there are these like vultures that have like this wow wow wow, or I think it's the crow like wow 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 wow. It's like, what the hell? Are you serious? That came from a crow? And they have vultures that just sound real scary. And of course, if you think about it, right? What's the closest thing we're gonna find today to dinosaurs? I'll get it. You know, these bunch of smarty pants out there. Yeah, birds are fantastic. I think that I use those more than I probably should, and it shows sometimes. But I will say this: you can get some really cool performances from birds. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So computer animator.
Hi.
So quick question on audio with animation. Do they have to animate some certain parts before you record audio, or do you record audio first? What's the process for that?
Typically they're okay. So what happens is, and I wanted to cover this, but I figured it might take too long. So I'm glad you asked. So typically how the process works is we record dialogue. Our editors take that dialogue. They work with the director, they put it on a timeline, they feel it all out. Now this is, again, how Rooster Teeth does things. We do something called radio plays. This is kind of a newer thing, where they cut it all on a timeline with nothing. There's nothing there, right? It's just black screen, dialogue. What happens then is it goes over to storyboard, and storyboard starts, they're putting their stuff together, they're kind of putting all the pieces together, and they make animatics from that. Now I might be skipping a step, and if anybody from work is watching, don't yell at me later. But animatics are the art of taking storyboards and putting it in a timeline as if it were the animation, but it's all still pictures, right? Unless you've got an ace storyboard artist, which we have a few of them, and they are really good at making it almost as if you're watching the animation. It's really cool. But from then, it goes on down the pipeline, continue, and animation gets to it, and that's when they start animating things to lip flaps. Now, do they animate scenes before they get that dialogue that aren't like mouth movements and such? Probably, right? It's okay, because you don't have to wait on that stuff. You can get started on a lot of grim, like the creatures in our show. Like, you can do all that stuff. Walk cycles get done pretty early on. Man, I can hear my producers yelling at me right now. So yes, the short answer is yes, there is a way to do that animation, and we have done animation without final dialogue in, or without recorded dialogue in. Then they have to go back and fix it. But let me tell you something. It's way easier to do it the first time right, instead of having to go back and fix all that stuff. Because there's a lot of people down that pipe that are waiting for that. So hopefully that, sweet. Cheater.
I didn't cheat.
I know him, so okay, fine, go for it.
So my name is Martin. I'm a recording arts grad from this past December. And I was wondering, when it came to fights and stuff, right? So if you have those whooshes, those low-passed, just like really crazy sounds in between the hits and in between the movements and even for the movements, what would you suggest on using for like the whooshes and like when it comes to like the sub hits and stuff like that? Because those are not really something that's like recorded. It's more of like a, I don't know.
Whooshes, oh, hold on, so we're talking about whooshes, we're talking about sub hits, what are we?
So both is kind of.
Okay, so for whooshes, there's a ton of great, if you want to record your own stuff, if you literally take anything and you wave in front of a microphone, it's going to make a whoosh, right? But there are libraries out there that you can get that have better sounding whooshes than others. Tim Preble has some great bamboo whooshes and some other stuff. There's also like, I like Tim Preble's stuff. Hiss and Aurora is his website. He's got some pretty good whooshes on there. I feel like maybe that, I'm like trying to answer both your questions here. So for whooshes, like it's just finding good quality whooshes that are already pre-recorded, or doing it yourself by waving stuff in front of it, and then just making sure you're putting it in the mono field, or unless it's a huge thing, big field. And if you have to throw reverbs on it, then throw reverbs on it. But the point is you want to make sure that you have some nice, good quality, like here's the whoosh, 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 that kind of thing. Has to do with your voice. Look at that. Wow. For the sub-hits and all that other stuff, that's like synthetic. A lot of that stuff is synthetic. A lot of places out there, Boom has cinematic strikes, cinematic Titan, cinematic metal. They have all sorts of cinematic sounds. It's all synth-based, right? You can go into Logic or Contact or whatever, and you can hit a lot of those like bass hits, boom, an 808 or what have you. Grab it, extend it, twist it, turn it, pop it, et cetera, et cetera. The point is you know, you can access a lot of that stuff if you have access to synth tools. So just remember, like the loudest sound comes from one, you know, right after the quietest moment. So if you're about to get punched, like if you're about to hit a punch or what have you, do a lot in anime where it's like that whole slow down or it stops for like a split second. Like even if there's like full on, it's about to happen. I like to cut a whoosh out like frames before the impact. That way it's like, whoosh, boom, and it hits, and it's just like not bad. But don't make all your punches huge. Give your fight room to grow and breathe and get bigger and better. Mark Kilborn and I were talking about this the other day. Like, how did I forget this? Mono sound effects, please. Do a lot of that. Don't make all of your stuff in stereo. I try to say this at every talk I'm at because it's very, very, very important. I get a lot of demo reels where people just make everything in stereo because it's cool or whatever, but it's not, so stop. Yeah, you want moments to sound cool, you need to make them cool. They have to earn it, right? And by doing more mono sound effects, it's here, it's in front of me. It moves across the screen. Someone asked me once, like, why I wouldn't take a stereo sound and pan it right to the middle. I'm like, well, that's more work than I want to do. I don't have to do that. Sum it down to mono, put it in the middle, call it a day, move on. If I'm here and you and I are punching each other and it's like ba 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 ba, and we get to the very end and I have a big stereo and mono sound together at the end of that, that's going to sound way bigger, way cooler than the first 8 jabs that I threw at you, because you know that's my knockout punch or what have you. So yeah, and don't be afraid to like use like explosions and stuff. That's way cool, but moderation, of course. So, did I answer your question? Cool beans.